Hi, it's Dwyer. It's May 24th, 2025. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, folks, I just watched the Moses Atama Mike Balogen fight. That's a must watch fight. Someone he sparred with in the past. Martin Bacoli was in the crowd, and they're hinting that Atama might fight Bacoli next. Right, folks? I want boxing to give us a gift. We deserve a gift here. Right? If Alexander Usyk, unbeaten Olympic gold medalist, undisputed at cruiser, undisputed at heavy, if he beats Daniel Dubois in the rematch, I believe Atama's very next fight should be Alexander Usyk. You know, Mike Tyson looked great when he was Moses Atama's age, right? Heavy puncher, destroyed guys, the punching power looked as hard as anything you'd seen. But you never got the feeling that Mike Tyson would be able to outbox you on your back foot. Right now, it's a must watch. Right? There are 3 knockdowns in this fight. 3. Right? Atama is a southpaw. Understand, Atama in the last 2 knockdowns gets them with his offhand, his right hand. The last knockdown is a must-see. It's Atama backing up. Folks, he has a back foot. And he drops a very game Mike Balogen, who just simply couldn't believe how composed this young guy was on the move. Right? The first knockdown's interesting, but that's his dominant hand. That's his left. He throws a very straight left. Then he comes back with the left hand, only this time he loops it. In fact, before the first knockdown, there's a moment where the fight's competitive. And then Atama lands a left hand. And you notice that Balogen pauses for a moment as if to say, what the hell was that? Right, folks, this is a superior talent. The question is, how superior? Right? He would be, in my opinion, given that Dubois already lost to Usyk, Dubois is a righty, AJ's a righty, Tyson Fury's ambidextrous but really couldn't go left-handed against Usyk. Here you have a guy who I have no doubt hits harder than Usyk. And he's two-handed. Folks, he just got this stoppage with his offhand. Right? And I'm telling you, his left, he can throw it straight, he can loop it. This is a David Benavidez situation. Right? Where you have a young guy, but he's clearly sparred with the best. So I've done a little research on Atama. And Atama has already been in the ring privately with AJ, with Fury, with Bacoli, with Joe Joyce, and with Daniel Dubois. Right, folks? This, the question here is whether he could handle the best. Alexander Usyk, right? The standard bearer right now. The guy who was undisputed at heavy, who gave up a belt, right? Which was won by Dubois, who, of course, Usyk's already beaten. Usyk's 38 years old. right? I'm hoping, and I would not blame any guy who's done what Usyk has done, right? He's attempting now to be undisputed at heavyweight for the second time, right? Any guy who's done what Usyk has done, if he wants to walk away from the sport, I don't blame him, right? There's always that young guy out there. Just math wise, you can't conquer every viable threat. Sooner or later, you have to look at yourself. I notice Usyk has tattoos of kids. I get the feeling he's a family guy. In other words, he has his life after boxing already mapped out. I obviously wouldn't begrudge him in the slightest if he were to say, hey, I've just become undisputed for a second time. For yahoos online, let me raise my hand, who felt that Dubois landed a legal punch and may have beaten me the first time. I fought Dubois in a rematch, right? You know, two undisputeds at heavyweight. Now's the time for my exit, especially since Moses Atama would be coming not to outbox Usyk, but to knock him out, right? You know, if you're 38 and you got an updated version of Mike Tyson, power in both hands, only this guy looks like he has some Ali in him, right? He has a back foot. He can move, right? As I've said in earlier videos too, Atama changes gear. In other words, you're watching him and, you know, you can't quite tell how fast his hands are. Then there are those moments where he's quicker than other moments. And you wonder if the guy is playing cards with you, right? Hiding the trump card that he has, right? Hiding his hand. You know, is this the poker player? Right? He's looking at you. You don't know. Is it a royal flush? Is he bluffing? You can't tell. Right? Well, let's look for clues here. The opening of the fight here. Understanding that Atama is a southpaw. So he has his right hand out in front of him. And folks, he's playing games. He's not even throwing straight jabs. He's just moving his hand. Right, folks? Fighting a southpaw is hard enough. When you're fighting a southpaw who is moving his hand, I wasn't sure if it was just to confuse Balogen, whether it was to knock down Balogen's hand, whether he was hoping to parry a jab and then come over the top with the brutal straight left that he has. I wasn't sure. Right? But folks, it was high-level stuff. This is a guy who might be young chronologically, but he understands the importance of rhythm. Right? Just look at his right hand. Enjoy it while it lasts. Right? Also realize when he throws the big left that has Balogen kind of like pause for a moment. This is before the knockdown, the first knockdown. Right? You'll notice his balance is such that it doesn't look like he's even thrown a big punch. Right? This isn't a Canelo left hook where you see Canelo's body in it. Right? You can tell it's violent. You can tell when Canelo misses that left hook that there's a lot of velocity on it. No, this is the guy with a base. This is the guy throwing bombs, and the only way you can tell, the only clue you have that he hit Balogen with something major was Balogen's pause. You saw Balogen take the shot, you know, dip a little bit and look up, and you realize he'd been hit with something powerful. Understand, too, this opponent didn't come to fall down. In other words, the first knockdown, he gets hit with a straight left. Right? Now think about the balance and the timing. Right? Also the fact that Atama's two-handed. Right? Later in the fight, we don't know it at the time because of the sequence. But later in the fight, he gets a couple of drops off his right hand. And understand, it's interesting, they even get confused on the telecast on which hand he threw. Right? This guy is very two-handed. But here he was, he gets Balogen hurt off a straight left. What does he do? He comes back with a clubbing left hand. So I don't want to see him. This is a guy I want to jump the line. Right? Because this is a present versus future situation. Right? This is even better than Larry Holmes, Mike Tyson, because Holmes had lost his title to Michael Spinks. Usyk's the reigning heavyweight champion. If he becomes undisputed again, given that he's 38 years old, given that Atama's unbeaten right now, given that that fight would be a battle of unbeatens, and it would be southpaw against southpaw. And understand, this is the guy, he doesn't tip his hand, but this is the guy who can move. On the telecast, they say he moves like a middleweight, but yet he's not really showing it that much. Again, you just see flashes. Right? Where he needs to get over here, suddenly he just gets over there. I think he can move with Usyk. I don't think Usyk's going to know what to do with this guy. Let me say, before the Usyk-Fury fight, I was here online and I was talking about a coordination gap between the two fighters. Folks, I'm not sure. And I've seen Atama fight a few times. I'm not sure if there's a coordination gap between Usyk and Atama. Right? Because Atama is the guy who's doing just enough to win. Let me say here too, what's shocking on the last knockout is that, and I give Balogen credit, right? He gets off the canvas, he decides, okay, look, whatever I have left, I'm going to spend it here. It's the idea of this young kid knocked me down. I want this guy to know, look, I'm going to be back in your face. So he aggressively comes after Atama. And it's interesting, right? Atama looks cool, calm, and collected. If there's a fault on him, it's that in the last sequence, he's a bit too calm and collected. Right here, he has a guy coming at him. He just backs up and lets his right hand go. Right? In other words, he doesn't have a hand up. He doesn't crouch and hide himself. No, this is the guy who has the utmost confidence in his punching power. Folks, he's scary. He's singular. Right? In a sport where, I call Philippe Ergovic the heir apparent. I think Ergovic's immensely talented. I concede the heavyweight division is the deepest it's been in a very long time. Right? When I see a great fighter like Usyk, and he's 38, and understand, the calendar doesn't wait for any of us. Right? He's 38 years old. In my eyes, every fight he fights from this time forward has to be a big fight. Right? I don't want him wasting the time he has left on inconsequential fights. I'd rather him be stripped of a belt than fight some fighter who he's going to beat. So if he beats Dubois, right? And Dubois has an interesting storyline where he's talking about having learned a lot of things since losing to Usyk. But if Usyk shows that Dubois hasn't learned enough, and if Usyk gets by that fight, then I hope the powers that be in boxing decide to treat the fans, because I believe the fans know enough to know that there are not that many guys in the heavyweight division who can give Usyk a real fight. And this guy, who has sparred with Fury, Bacoli, AJ, Joyce, Dubois, but not Usyk, might be the guy to give him the big fight. Right? This is that rare heavyweight who has shown us at this young age that he can knock you out with his offhand backing up. Folks, that's this film. Right? I'll concede Balogen, isn't an elite heavyweight. Right? But Balogen had power. Balogen certainly came to fight. Right? He's not trying to run away from Moses Atama. Right? Even when he's knocked down, and he's knocked down hard, he gets up. Right? This is not a guy looking for a soft place to lie down in the ring. This guy came to upset Atama. And Atama shows the whole package. Right? Gets knockdowns with both hands. Gets a knockdown on his front foot. Gets two backing up. Right? Is confident. Can box. Isn't a, one punch type guy. Is putting punches together. If he throws a straight left and you survive it, he comes back with the looping left. Right? This is a superior talent. I hope somehow Usyk gets the memo and says, okay, look, if I beat Dubois the second time, this young phenom, unbeaten, is the next guy I'm going to fight. Right? I think Martin Bacoli's dangerous. I think Bacoli would give Alexander Usyk a difficult fight, especially after all the sparring stories. But the bottom line is, Bacoli doesn't move like this kid. Right? There's an upside to Atama. Also, Bacoli has lost twice. Right? The Michael Hunter fight. The Joe Parker fight. Right? I believe that if Usyk pivots here, and I do agree, Joe Parker clearly deserves a shot at the title. Right? But if he pivots to Atama, I'll have no objection. Right? We all understand when the old guard is almost on the way out the door. 38 is what it is. Right? Heavyweights age more slowly, but understand, power's the last to go, and Usyk is really relying more on coordination and movement, not power. Right? So, understand the setup too. If he fights Atama and the young guy is too much for him, we've seen this before. It's a common thread in boxing. If the young guy pulls the upset, then you would have young Moses Atama as the undisputed heavyweight champion, sitting atop a division with several dangerous sluggers with far more experience than him. Right? That would be a moment for boxing. For those who don't know about Moses Atama, I've posted a film of the fight, the highlights of the fight. In fact, I believe it is the fight, because the fight didn't go that long, on gamblersadvisory.com. Please, give it a look. As you watch it, look for the little things. Right? Atama looks like he has his feet wide apart. But yet, the guy is able to move. And I mean move well. Right? Understand, too, when the guy is, playing games with his right hand early, it freezes Balogen. Right? Atama has a few early knockouts. Right? This guy has clearly thought through what he's doing with his hands. Right? Also, just look at the calmness. It's a bit unsettling. right? He has no doubt on the last sequence that he's going to land that right hand, right? This is a southpaw. He's going to land that right hand, and that he's not in a position with the guy lunging at him to get countered, right? Just in terms of his foot movement, he's faster than most of the heavyweight division. Let me say this too. You have some guys at heavyweight who hit hard, right? Big baby Jared Anderson hits hard, right? But you can tell when Anderson throws a big shot, he's not immediately ready to throw another big shot, right? Look closely at Atama, folks. He's dangerous. His balance is superior. This is a guy who might be a combination puncher, but he's playing his cards close to the vest. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this YouTube video. Don't get me wrong. Bakole against Atama would be interesting, right? There are moments in the Effie Ajagba, and I believe this guy would be too much for Ajagba because Atama is not that tall, and I think Ajagba moved phenomenally well against Martin Bakole. But let's just say boxing is relative, right? He moved well against Martin Bakole. I'm telling you, this guy, Atama, is deceptive, right? This is the guy who you're looking at him, you're wondering how well does he move? And then you realize he moves well enough, right? They asked Deion Sanders once, the Hall of Famer, Coach Prime now, but when he was a player, they asked Deion Sanders, how fast do you run? And Deion's response was, I run faster than the next man. That's this kid. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. I don't want this kid. This kid looks like a prodigy to me. I don't want this kid spending his time fighting the Bakoles and the Ajagbas. I want him to give us a treat. Let's see unbeaten against unbeaten. Right? Put him in with Usyk. Let's have that fight now. I don't want to wait until Usyk is too old and stuff like that. No, I want that fight right now, especially if Usyk becomes undisputed at heavy for a second time. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.